Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Our top story: the clock is ticking. Countries must strike a trade deal with the U.S. or face higher tariffs. That pressure is rising on BRICS nations, with President Trump warning of an additional 10% tariff for anti-American policies. This year's BRICS summit in Brazil is missing two key leaders, Chinese leader Xi Jinping and Russian President Vladimir Putin. What's behind their absence? New evidence revealing possible Chinese interference in the 2020 presidential election and how the FBI buried a key report. A special car parade rolling through New York City over Independence Day weekend, adding a new message to the holiday celebration. And after pledging a historic defense budget boost, the NATO chief is highlighting Taiwan as a key to global security and warning of global risks if China invades.
Let's really be not naive about this. If Xi Jinping would attack Taiwan, he will first make sure that he makes a call to his very junior partner in all of this, Vladimirovich Putin.
President Donald Trump says the U.S. is nearing the finish line on several new trade deals. For countries that haven't made a deal with the U.S., higher tariffs could take effect starting August 1st. Trump confirmed that at least 15 warning letters about the increased tariffs will be sent out Monday. On a Sunday, Trump also warned BRICS nations to prepare for an extra 10% tariff if they engage in any, quote, anti-American policies. His warning came shortly after BRICS leaders issued a joint statement appearing to criticize Trump's tariff policies. BRICS is an economic bloc made up of some of the world's strongest developing countries, including China. The group challenges the U.S.-led financial system and is pushing for alternatives to the U.S. dollar. Here's more.
There are going to be tariffs. The tariffs are going to be the tariffs. I think we'll have most countries done by July 9th, yeah? Either a letter or a deal.
In a later social media post, Trump said Washington would start delivering the tariff notification letters from Monday. Subsequently, he also rolled out a whole new policy, saying countries that aligned themselves with the BRICS group of developing nations, founded by Brazil, Russia, India and China, would be hit with an extra 10% levy. It wasn't immediately clear how that would affect ongoing talks. Only recently, Trump himself had mentioned India as among the nations likely to get a deal. On Sunday, one Indian news channel said the two sides were expected to make a decision on a mini-trade pact within the next 24 to 48 hours.
Hours after Trump's tariff hike warning, China's foreign ministry said the BRICS forum isn't targeting any country, including the United States. It also accused President Trump of using trade measures as leverage. Currently, Chinese goods entering the U.S. face combined tariffs totaling 55%. Turning to two of America's closest allies in Asia, President Trump on Monday posted letters on Truth Social addressed to Japan and South Korea. In the letters, Trump announced he'll impose a 25% tariff on goods from both countries starting August 1st. He cited the ongoing trade deficit as the reason behind the move. To China, Trump said this week marks the beginning of discussions over the ownership of the Chinese-owned app TikTok. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent declined to say whether TikTok negotiations would be tied to broader trade talks. He did confirm a meeting with his Chinese counterpart in the coming weeks to discuss whether talks could extend beyond trade into other areas. The BRICS summit is underway in Brazil, bringing together 10 nations, including Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. But two major leaders are absent this year: Chinese regime leader Xi Jinping and Russian President Vladimir Putin. The Kremlin says Putin is skipping the event due to an outstanding arrest warrant from the International Criminal Court. He's attending virtually instead. Xi Jinping's absence marks his first since taking power in China over a decade ago, sparking speculation over the no-show. Let's dive in. On Wednesday, Beijing said Premier Li Qiang will attend the BRICS summit on behalf of Xi. No explanation was given for Xi Jinping's absence. A former Chinese official told NTD that Xi sees the BRICS summit as a key diplomatic stage and has never missed the meeting since 2013. He linked Xi's absence to possible health issues. But others see things differently. Retired General Mike Flynn recently posted on X calling on the Trump administration to watch for a clear power shift inside the Chinese regime. Flynn served as National Security Advisor during President Trump's first term. Associate Professor Chong Jia-ying, a political scientist at the National University of Singapore, says there may be two reasons behind Xi Jinping's absence. First, Xi is focused on addressing China's domestic economic challenges, and second, he likely sees little chance of a major breakthrough at this year's forum. The BRICS summit is widely seen as a China-led effort to counter Western influence on the global stage. New details are shedding light on how the FBI handled early warnings of possible Chinese interference in the 2020 presidential election. Last Tuesday, Senator Chuck Grassley released internal FBI emails from that year. The emails show that an internal report warning of potential voter fraud linked to China was quietly pulled and never made public. Records show the FBI blocked the probe over concerns it would contradict then-Director Christopher Wray's 2020 Senate testimony, which dismissed claims of coordinated voter fraud. Internal emails reveal FBI headquarters questioned the report's reliability and ordered the Albany field office, which had issued the report, to re-interview the source for more information. However, the report was never reissued. FBI Assistant Director Marshall Yates later reviewed the case. He said the source seemed reliable and called the recall abnormal. The report, which circulated ahead of the 2020 primaries, alleged that Chinese officials forged a large number of fake U.S. documents and shipped them into the country. It claimed this allowed tens of thousands of Chinese students and immigrants to vote for former Democratic candidate Joe Biden, even though they weren't eligible. This claim was supported by U.S. Customs and Border Protection, which reportedly seized nearly 20,000 fake U.S. driver's licenses at Chicago's O'Hare Airport that July. The day after Christopher Wray's testimony, FBI headquarters changed its policy on handling election-related intel, making it harder to access the original report. One FBI analyst said it felt like the information wasn't being shared for political reasons, which goes against the FBI's mission to stay neutral and simply report the facts. Senator Grassley called the move political, saying it showed the FBI under Wray's leadership was, quote, deeply broken. He added that intelligence should always be fully investigated. Grassley also thanked current FBI Director Kash Patel for his efforts to restore transparency. Over the Independence Day weekend, a unique car parade took place in New York City, but this was not a typical celebration. Let's take a closer look.
A group of volunteers took to the streets, starting in Flushing, Queens, and driving through Times Square, Lower Manhattan's Chinatown, and past the Chinese consulate in Midtown. Their message? Raising awareness about the Chinese Communist Party's growing influence on American soil.
I'm from Belarus, and I know what's Communist Party did with USSR, with my country, so I'm happy to sign.
The event is part of a nationwide effort by the Global Service Center for Quitting the Chinese Communist Party, a nonprofit based in New York.
I'm very happy to participate in this car tour. I also joined the 21-day tour across the eastern and western United States.
Liu says the NCCP car tour is one of their several initiatives pushing back against what they call foreign political interference by the Chinese Communist Party. The campaign began in September 2021 amid the COVID-19 pandemic. Last year, the group completed a tour across all 50 U.S. states, ending in Hawaii. This weekend's New York parade continues the group's effort to highlight the Chinese Communist Party's foreign influence. Time to coincide with America's 249th Independence Day, a celebration of freedom and democracy.
Beijing's potential invasion of Taiwan could spark Russian attacks on NATO countries. That's the stark warning from NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte during an interview on the New York Times podcast, The Interview. Let's take a listen.
Let's really be not naive about this. If Xi Jinping would attack Taiwan, he will first make sure that he makes a call to his very junior partner in all of this, Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin, residing in Moscow, and telling him, hey, I'm going to do this, and I need you to keep them busy in Europe by attacking NATO territory.
To avoid a nightmare scenario, Rutte says the alliance must tackle two key tasks. First, NATO members must collectively boost their defense capabilities to deter Russian aggression. China and Russia declared a no-limits friendship shortly before Moscow launched its war in Ukraine over 3 years ago. Just 2 weeks ago, NATO nations agreed to raise defense spending to 5% of their GDP by 2035. Since the start of President Trump's second term, the Pentagon has shifted focus from Europe to the Indo-Pacific, primarily due to rising threats from communist China. That leads to the second task. NATO must work closely with Washington to ensure peace in the Indo-Pacific. There, the self-governed democratic island of Taiwan is facing mounting threats. U.S. Indo-Pacific commanders said China's military aggression toward Taiwan surged 300% last year. The Pentagon is also raising alarms over reported orders from Chinese regime leader Xi Jinping, urging the military to be ready to invade Taiwan by 2027. That's less than 2 years away. During the New York Times interview, Reuters says China's military buildup is likely preparing for exactly that invasion. In April, a Pentagon official called China's military buildup across nuclear, conventional, cyber, and space domains as, quote, unprecedented. China announcing a new flight route near Taiwan. Taiwan condemned the move, calling it a unilateral action aimed at altering the status quo in the Taiwan Strait. Let's zoom in.
China on Sunday said it opened a flight route close to an unofficial median line in the Taiwan Strait between China and Taiwan. Taiwanese officials said China is using unilateral action to change the status quo and increase cross-strait and regional unrest.
The opening of this flight route helps the Chinese military project power in Taiwan's north and makes a potential invasion easier. By using a civilian route close to the median line, it reduces Taiwan's reaction time and space.
China has now opened 4 controversial flight routes in the Taiwan Strait. The main route is M503, which is just west of the median line. Last year, China moved the M503 route closer to the median line and rolled out 2 extensions from China to M503. This week, Taiwan will hold its annual Hong Kong military drill in preparation for possible threats by China.
Politically, the move comes just before Taiwan's Han Kuang drills and may test the Trump administration's response to regional tensions.
This is part of China's gray zone strategy. These tactics stop short of triggering military conflict, but still push to gain influence and advantage over Taiwan.
Coming up, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu met with President Trump at the White House to discuss peace in the Middle East. What does this mean for China? An expert weighs in.
It's really a great geopolitical competition, and this would be a real, taking the queen in a chess match.
A Rotary Satellite Club in Canada is taking action to stop forced organ harvesting in China. They're urging communities to stand against these atrocities.
I realize how serious this is actually, and how if we don't stop forced organ harvesting, this can happen in many, many countries.
And France criticizing Chinese imports for harming Europe's industrial economy. The country is now calling for stronger tariff barriers against China. That and more in just a minute here on China in Focus. Welcome back to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu met with President Trump at the White House on Monday. At stake, Iran's nuclear program, a possible ceasefire and hostage deal in the Gaza Strip, and an expansion to the Abraham Accords. The Abraham Accords are agreements that normalize diplomatic relations between Israel and several Arab nations aimed at boosting peace in the Middle East. What does all of this mean for China? David Wormser, Middle East Affairs Analyst at the Center for Security Policy, commented on the implications earlier. David, how are you reading all of this? What's the likely impact on China, actually, which has been angling to be seen as a mediator in the region?
Excellent question. I was just about to go there with China. I think the big loser, if there's an expansion of the Abraham Accords, is China. Because at the end of the day, you've created, with a peace with Saudi Arabia, you've created a geographic continuity between Jordan, Saudi Arabia, all the way over to the UAE, the Persian Gulf, and over to the Indian Ocean. And you've created a whole structure that is under what's called the IMEC system, which is the Indian Middle East Trade Corridor structure. It's a whole structure strategically between India and Israel that links up to Greece on the other side, India to Asia on the other, and it's really a competition for China's Belt and Road Initiative, which runs through Pakistan, Iran, Turkey, and so forth. So it's really a great geopolitical competition, and this would be a real, taking the queen in a chess match for the West if there's a strategic agreement between Israel and Saudi Arabia. And we see already with the BRICS summit that India has been somewhat alienated because the BRICS did not side with India on the issue of Pakistan. So they're already separated. So I think this is really a geopolitical move forward, if achieved, a great feather in President Trump's hat if it happens.
Concerned citizens in Canada are taking action to stop forced organ harvesting. A Rotary Satellite Club is raising global awareness through public outreach events. Their group, Community Action Against Human Trafficking, uses information booths, documentary screenings, and petition drives to expose the truth behind the brutal practice, calling on communities to take a stand against the atrocities. Here's the story.
At the information booth hosted by the Satellite Rotary Club, a steady stream of people stop by to learn more. The bold message, "Stop Forced Organ Harvesting," draws public attention. Many take time to speak with volunteers, sign the petition on site, and begin to engage with this critical human rights issue.
I realize how serious this is, actually, and how if we don't stop forced organ harvesting, this can happen in many, many countries.
The forced organ harvesting is a horrific crime. Falun Gong practitioners, it is the largest group that have been persecuted in China. But this persecution seems to be extended outside of China to everywhere around the world.
A Rotary Satellite Club has long raised awareness about forced organ harvesting. Recently, it held global documentary screenings of state organs, including 2 public screenings and panel discussions at Calgary Central Library. The award-winning film presents compelling evidence of the Chinese regime's ongoing human rights abuses against Falun Gong practitioners, sparking deep reflection and discussion among attendees. Falun Gong is a spiritual practice rooted in the principles of truthfulness, compassion, and tolerance, and features gentle exercises and meditation.
You know, this is a government like any other communist government that doesn't tolerate spiritual practices, either eliminated in China through forced organ harvesting and horrible torture and persecution. Outside of China, they've been using something called transnational repression.
From the number from China Tribunal, it was from 65,000 to 90,000 per year. It's commercialized and on a commercial scale.
My heart is so heavy. Like, it just is it's gonna tear up. It's such a heavy topic that more people need to know about. We've got to get the word out so people understand what the atrocity is like.
Additionally, the Satellite Rotary Club has actively launched petitions to promote legislation in the U.S. and other countries aimed at ending forced organ harvesting. They call on society at large to stand together in defending human rights.
We signed a petition to try to get, in addition to the U.S. House of Representatives, to have a bill that condemns this to get to the U.S. Senate.
The atrocities that are being perpetrated against Falun Gong are comparable to, if not in excess, of what happened under Nazi Germany. Of course, I would support the province of Alberta to follow up with corresponding provincial legislation.
Everyone should know and everyone should get involved to try to stop.
NTD News, Canada.
Another major group targeted for forced organ harvesting is the Uyghurs, who live in China's Xinjiang region. At least 1 million have been detained in labor camps. End Transplant Abuse in China, an Australia-based human rights charity, reported that China is tripling the number of facilities used for forced organ harvesting in the region, bringing the total to 9. The organization points out that the Xinjiang region's official donation rate is as low as only 0.69 donors per million people, making the decision to expand transplant facilities highly suspicious. France's Finance Minister Eric Lombard criticizes Chinese imports for harming Europe's industrial economy. He said Europe must strengthen tariff barriers to protect its industries. Here's more.
Lombard mentioned Europe's actions to protect domestic steel and cars, but he says wider restrictions are needed. Speaking at an economics conference in France, he said all industrial sectors need tariff protection. He said that otherwise, the Chinese policy of having more than 50% global market share in each sector will kill European industry. The Chinese regime imposed new duties on European brandy on Friday. The EU imposed up to 45% tariffs on electric vehicles from China just last year.
That's all for today's China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. If you have any feedback on the show or have something you'd like to see us cover, send us an email at chinainfocus@ntd.com. We'd love to hear from you. Round the clock original news coverage, visit us at ntd.com or download our NTD app. Thanks for watching. See you tomorrow.